Hello, I'm James Valentine, and welcome to a special episode of Life's Booming. And we're calling this episode, Where There's a Will, There's a Relative. Many Australians put off creating or updating their wills, often because it feels like it's something that can be addressed later. But in reality, life is unpredictable, and having a current will is an important step to protect your family and reflect how you'd like to leave your affairs when that time comes. October the 20th is Update Your Will Day. And if you know anyone who's got a will and needs to update it, please share this podcast with them and then, leave us a comment, leave us a review. So on this episode, we're going to explore wills and the need to update it and in some ways the ease of updating it with two really great guests. So we'll be joined by Barry Du Bois, who you might remember from The Living Room, which is a great show on renovation and home design and that sort of stuff. He's been a designer and a builder. But in these days, he's now focusing on mental health. He's a keynote speaker on these issues and he's got an extraordinary story to tell. Adam Lebowski is the CEO and founder of Safe Will, a platform that you can use online to complete your will and get all that done. So Barry, Adam, thanks for joining us. Barry, you're one of the few people I know who's heard the immortal words, it's time to put your affairs in order.
Yeah, it happened to me in 2011, and that's exactly what she said. I think the best thing you can do is go home, tidy up your affairs, and you've got about 3 months to go.
What'd you have? Who was telling you?
Okay, well, that was one of three doctors I was sitting in front of. I'm smiling about it now, but it was my wife was beside me. She was in tears. I'd been I went in for to pick up some x-rays for something I thought was really minor that morning at 9 o'clock. From there, I ended up at St Vincent's Hospital, and I'd been in and out of CT machines all day. I had several blood tests. I'd been in an MRI machine, and what seemed like a perfectly normal day at 4 o'clock that afternoon, I sat before three doctors, and the first one says, "Barry, I think you should just go home, tidy up your affairs. This is too aggressive. It's too big."
This being cancer.
This being a plasmacytoma myeloma and the base of my brain there. And I said, well, thanks for that. My wife used an expletive of where she thought she should go.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't want you on my team. You're not part of anything I do from now on. And I said to the next doctor, I'm not sure what your expertise is, but you do the best you can. And I'm going to do whatever I can. And the third doctor was a bit baffled by my positive attitude, but I have got a positive attitude.
Seems to be getting rid of the other two. I'll go with this guy.
Yeah, and he suggested I got some psychological help. That's right. Not a joke. That's the truth. But he'd do whatever he could with my blood. He's a professor of hematology. But I did think 90 days. What if they're right? And there was a lot of my time was taken up with not believing it would happen, but making sure if it did.
And so up until that point, did you have a will?
Yeah, I did have a will. I retired when I was 45. I was very lucky. I'm a very lucky guy. But
until recently.
No, because I say I'm a lucky guy. I retired when I was 45. But when I was 40, I fell 14 metres off a building.
Right.
And that was the time I didn't have children at that stage. I had just lost a friend, and I thought I didn't care about dying. It wasn't something I ever focused on. But I thought, you know what? I have some money, and I'm recently married, and I thought if we're going to be married, I don't want there to be any confusion if something happens, because the morning I fell off the building, I didn't know I was going to fall off a building. Right. The morning I got cancer, I didn't know I was going to get cancer. No one wakes you up in the morning and says, hey, listen, by the way, 7 days, you're out.
Yeah.
No one says that.
Yeah. And so put your affairs in order. Was the first thing you thought of a will?
No, I'll be honest. When she said that, I thought, get me out of here. I'm a celebrity. Get me out of here. No, I wasn't a celebrity. But I said, no, just get me out of this place. I don't want to hear that. I don't believe that. But I will say this. It's interesting. When a doctor had told me a couple of years earlier, about 5 years earlier, that my mum had about a month to go, I said, you're wrong. That's not true. That can't happen. And 28 days later, she died. So that was the wake up call for me, was when my mum passed. And I knew it was important that I had a will.
Yeah. And when you went back to look at it, like it had been 10 years since you'd looked at the will or anything like that?
It's funny. I'm a control freak.
Right.
And I'm a spontaneous sort of a guy as well. And I live life to the max. There's no doubt about that. But every now and then I'll say, how long has it been since I've looked at that will? And
Right.
a lot has changed. And in our lives, so much changes so often. The dynamics of our environment, our community, who are around us at the time, all those sorts of things. And for me, the will is, I'm not sure about you, Adam, but I also have a lot of instructions of what I think should happen in the future. No one has to have that, but that's a big part of it for me. I just want to remind people why my legacy is important and what I think. I always ask the question is, if you could tell your great-great-grandchildren one piece of advice, what is it? So I leave that piece of advice with my will as well.
Well, I would say to my great-great-grandchildren, update your will.
Yeah.
Just keep that regular, keep it there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're both wearing shirts with update your will. Adam, you've been listening to Barry's story. I mean, what I hear in Barry's story is that sort of strong... Like, really, we just all live with the denial of death. And doing the will requires a moment where you go, I'm going to die.
I think that's right. For a lot of people, there's a big emotional barrier to writing a will. We actually have a lot of people come to SafeWill, which is now the nation's largest will writing platform. They'll fill out the instructions, they'll go to all the effort, and then there'll just be a barrier to them printing off and signing and completing the will.
So you're describing me. You are describing me. This is exactly, my wife and I we've done the Safe Will thing. I've had cancer in the last year. That still hasn't made us press print and go and get the damn thing signed.
Yeah, there's this barrier, whether it's emotional, cognitive, we're not quite sure. It seems to tap people in different ways. But there's something that stops people taking that final step.
What do you think it is? Is it just that sort of it's too much? It's too much to admit that we're going to die.
I think for a lot of people it is. I think that there's also a finality that comes with, there's a perception that finalising your will, that's the last time that you'll be able to finalise your will. Because so many people put it off, they won't update their will regularly. So for a lot of people, there's this big decision hurdle to get over in executing their will.
Yeah.
And part of what we've tried to design in digital platforms to make it very easy for people to come back, update their will, leave further instructions, like Baz was saying. If you're going away on a flight, you want to change something or add a little bit more colour, to make it as easy as possible for people to try to overcome that barrier with
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I do a lot of keynote speaking around the mental health space, and I say this in a lot of my talks. Your will is an important thing, not just for your legacy, but it's also cathartic. What you're actually doing is preparing something to know that everything is the way you want it.
Right.
Imagine if you could imagine the last seconds of your life and there are, I forgot to do this, I forgot to do that. When I lay to rest, I want to know everything is in a good space. And for me, I wrote a book that was very cathartic, but in a mini way, your affairs, the administration of your affairs is a cathartic thing. You know that you're leaving a legacy and it's going really clearly where you want it to go.
Do you think you would have done it, because it's not you described your first encounter with death, your first close encounter with death. That's not the only one. You've had another cancer diagnosis, which also gave you a time frame. Yeah. Do you think without that you would have done it? Has this really sharpened your attention on?
I say it all the time. The vision of mortality. That waterfall, which is the end. When I'm one of the few people that are here to talk about that. I've seen that a couple of times, but I think it puts you in a more positive space. If that's the answer to that question.
Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't call it Update Your Will Day, but Accept Your Death Day could be the.
or why not put it to another way? It's not Accept Your Death. None of us are getting out of here alive. Yeah. It's just to be the best version of you.
Yeah.
If you create something that is a really straightforward and thought about at a rational time way you want things to go, well, that's just being the best person you can be. Make a rational decision at a rational time. I didn't have that rationale in the 90 days. It was funny because I put that date in my calendar. This is when she predicted I was going to go. And I was probably a lot more irrational at that time. I was trying to do too many things and trying to change too much too quickly.
Yeah. How detailed do we need to be, Adam? Can I just sort of say, okay, everything goes to the wife and sign?
Yeah, so the will itself, from a legal perspective, doesn't need to be, war and peace. It really can be, a simple set of instructions, which, platforms like ours can take 5 to 10, 15 minutes. As I love your framing of it, though, as, not just thinking about it from a legal perspective, but also from the concept of emotional and legacy, and being able to add a little bit more colour to, whether it's advice for future generations, whether it's a sentimental gift. And there's definitely the opportunity to do that as well. So ticking the legal box and getting something that's effectual doesn't need to be a huge song and dance. But that said, for a lot of people, there is a catharsis that comes with writing the will and being able to leave, a legacy for you.
But I suppose in practical terms, we're just asking, is it, a simple sentence that says, all of my property goes to my wife or goes to my children divided 3 ways. Do I have to provide all the documents about that property and list everything? And
no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I definitely wouldn't recommend a self-drafted will because there are certain things that, again, whether going with a lawyer or a platform that's being designed by lawyers, the documents will be a lot more effective and comprehensive. But, for ours as an example, there are 4 mandatory areas in thinking about how your estate is divided, who acts as your executor, and so on. But once you've done that, you've got an effective will. And so it really can be as easy as 10 minutes done from your phone.
I wonder if it sounds a bit grand almost when you say your estate. I start to see Downton Abbey, really, and I'm a bequest to the servants. But, anybody who owns a home, anybody who owns a car, anybody who's got some savings, that's an estate,
a superannuation.
Superannuation.
I think that's part of the barrier as well. I think that a lot of people think that, wow, I don't have a vast asset holding and therefore I'm not eligible to write a will or it's not worthwhile me writing a will because I don't have a huge fortune to pass on to future generations. But really, it's not about how much you own. It's about making it easier for the people who are left behind to deal with your estate, whether it is just a superannuation account in a bank account in a car or a property. It doesn't need to be, vast asset holdings to justify making a will.
I mean, in my case, it is.
James, not everyone.
Or Barry's,
but it is your life. Effectively, it's your life and what happens with it. Can I ask a question? What about Instagram accounts and stuff like that? Can they be bequeathed in wills?
Yeah, absolutely. So increasingly, social media accounts and digital businesses even they are seen as assets. So Meta have a section as part of their accounts that most people don't know about. That allow people to provide access to other people or profiles upon death. You can actually select from a pre-listed set of options whether you want the account closed down, passed on to another person.
Maybe this is something that we need to sharpen people's focus on. If you don't, I think many people would assume that if you don't write a will, well, it automatically goes to the wife or the children.
So that's not the case. There are 2 major implications to passing away without a will. The first is that your estate will be divided according to a statutory government formula. So rather than you dictating exactly how you'd want your estate divided, whether you want your kids to inherit, your partner left to charity, the government has a predetermined formula for how your estate gets divided based on your family circumstances. That may or may not align with your personal wishes. So the first is being able to have a measure of control over how your estate is going to be divided. On top of that, the process for administering an estate without a will becomes a whole lot more complex than where there is a legally valid, straightforward will in place. So instead of going down the sort of bread and butter probate route where there's clear instructions and the court will generally pay effect to the wishes in a will, you need to go down the letters of administration route. It becomes a lot more expensive, a lot more complicated, and a protracted legal process. For a lot of families where they are relying on the proceeds of an estate to pay for food, to pay a mortgage, an extra month, an extra few months in trying to administer an estate can be quite detrimental.
Yeah. I like what Adam said, Barry, that, you're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it for those you're going to leave behind, for your wife, for your partner, for your children and so forth. So they don't have to suddenly deal. They're not dealing with what Adam's just describing there, a protracted, messy legal process.
No, I agree. I mean, like I said, I whatever I do, I want to do the very best I can for my children. That's the most important thing in the world to me is my children and how they live their life once I'm gone. And I want to know, I'd like to change a lot of the world so we have a better place for them. But if administering, and I discuss, my wife and I are very open about, how we discuss this and that sort of thing, because it's important because, 1 minute you're a single guy, I'll tell you my life. 1 minute you're a single guy, and then all of a sudden you're in love. Something's happened. You've acquired property. You've had a child. You've had a career switch. You've had a bit of luck, or you've had a bit of bad luck, and all of a sudden you're sitting 64 years old with a blood cancer that can't be cured in 12-year-old twins. Yeah, it happens like that.
Yeah.
And whilst that might sound a little gloom, I love my life, and I'm really happy that I've done the best I can for future generations.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the interesting things about a will as a product is that it's something that you have to write that you will never be able to use and you'll never be able to see the benefit of.
Right.
And it really is an interesting
effectively it's your biography.
That's exactly right. And so you can never do it for you because you're never going to be able to use the will. It has to be done in service of your loved ones and the legacy.
I wonder if that's another barrier. I wonder if that's another thing that unconsciously where along with the denial of death, it's also not for us. So we don't really care about it in a way. We've got to make people care about it.
Let me add to that. I do a lot of personal coaching as well, and some of my executives will make very drastic changes to the wills at very irrational times when they're angry, when it's after divorce. And, I think for me anyway, I'm really happy with the decisions I've made because they're not for me. They're not a way for me to hurt someone or help someone. They're for the best that can happen for my kids and my wife.
Yeah. Can all wills be challenged, or can you make a will that's so that this will be followed? No strange cousin can come out of the woodwork. No brother you're estranged from can suddenly start to challenge the thing.
It's a great question, and it's a really interesting part of the law. Any will can be challenged, so nothing can stop a potential beneficiary coming forward and making a claim on the will. The best thing that can be done is to have a very clear, up-to-date set of instructions, socialise those instructions. So the sort of old perception of, I've written a will, need to hide it in my cupboard and not let anyone see it until I pass away. Not a great idea. The more well-known, the more justified, the more explained the wishes are, the less likely they can be challenged because people know about it. It's been expressed.
So you tell everyone, tell the family what
exactly
you've done.
Right. And so I think having a surprise will is often where you have that emotional reactions from people about, oh, wow, I wasn't expecting that. Or, I thought I'd be getting more, or I thought this instruction would look like this. And so surprises when it comes to wills and estates is generally not a great idea.
Oh, see, I want the reading. I want the crusty old lawyer in the mahogany room going, and you can have my underpants. That's what I'm hoping for.
It's great for Hollywood, a lot less good for real life.
Yeah. So it can be challenged. I'm interested in that notion that you're saying, tell everybody about it. I think we tend to be private. We think this is very private. If we're thinking about it and if we've done it, it's sort of very personal and you won't find out. I'm not going to tell you exactly what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are a lot of circumstances where it makes sense to keep things confidential. There can be instructions that would be problematic or that, people might disagree with. And generally speaking, though, where wishes are very well known, they've been discussed over a long period of time. And because, as Baz said, try to make sure that people don't make impulsive wills or impulsive decisions when it comes to estate planning. And the more well known and socialized wishes are, generally speaking, the better the results for the family.
Yeah, and we're probably talking about this in a fairly simple kind of procedure, aren't we? We're talking about, it's a family. There's a house. There's some superannuation, on it goes. Vastly complicated when we start to talk about farms or family businesses or things like this. That requires real planning, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that's where you start moving from sort of estate plans to succession plans, and considerations around businesses, trust structures becomes a lot more complicated. So for us, what we've built by way of a product is a digital platform that allows people to create a straightforward will, access on-demand legal advice from our law firm as well, where they do have business interest or trust structures. Generally, they'd get in touch with our law firm and access what's called a testamentary trust will, which creates a trust structure around the will and to allow for more effective asset transfer for broad asset holders.
Is yours watertight? Or I suppose another way I'm thinking about this is, what's the absolute minimum requirement? Are those will kits from the post office or the newsagent or something like that, are they watertight?
They can be if done correctly. So I think one of the challenges again, a will kit, if filled in properly from the post office, can absolutely be a binding, valid will. The challenge comes with users following the instructions correctly and not having limits to what they can put in fields, as well as the complications around signing and updating the will. So a paper-based will kit becomes very difficult to update, and it's generally recommended, tear it up and write a new one. A platform like SafeWill, the difference between a digital will kit and a post office or a paper-based will kit. With digital instructions, you're limited by what you can put in certain fields. There's a review process for every will that gets submitted on our platform. So our partner law firm makes sure that the will is being filled in correctly, and that people have put the right instructions in the right places, because most of us aren't lawyers. We don't know exactly what an executor is. We don't know the difference between an estate and a gift. And so, providing that level of oversight is quite important.
Yeah. Look, great to talk to you both. Barry, you've done a will. Adam, you've done yours?
Absolutely.
I thought you might have. So statistically, 1 out of 3 people in this room haven't done their will. Is that about the national stats as well?
Yeah, that's correct. So the national stats, they're widely publicised and they do seem to vary, but about 1 in 3 Australians over the age of 50 haven't done a will. And of those that have, about 50% haven't updated it in the last 5 years. A lot of people don't realise that certain changes to personal circumstances can actually invalidate part or all of their will. Things like getting married, getting divorced, entering into a blended family structure can have significant impacts on the validity of your will. So it's important, firstly, to write your will, James, and then it's important to also make sure that it's updated and kept up to date.
Well, we're proud to be part of the lazy third, and to see what I like is we'll probably come back and do this again next year, and I'll go, is this coming around again? I still haven't done it. I promised to do it. It's not that hard. Finish off the process, get it done.
Or I'll be saying to Adam, James should have done his will, shouldn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so, what's your name? The new interviewer?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's such a pity. Yes, he just proved totally resistant to the whole thing. Adam, give us the tip. I mean, maybe there's common myths that we all have about the will. I mean, I just see a big mahogany room with a crusty old lawyer reading out the will. Does that happen, or debunk some of the will myths?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest myths is that everything has to be entirely perfect to write your will. In reality, having something in place is better than nothing. So our recommendation is to get it done, get it printed, get it signed, and get it safely stored, and then to make sure that you are coming back to revisit it and update it. It is easy to update a will. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect and in place. So our biggest tip is to take the leap, stop putting it off, and write your will.
Yeah, okay. This feels so personal when you say that.
Yeah.
But Barry, what have you found out about wills through this whole process?
It's interesting. I think everybody thinks I don't have enough to do a will, or it's too hard, or I don't want to talk about death and that sort of thing. But as someone who's done a will and is regularly updating it, it's a cathartic feeling. I know that doing my will is part of being the best person I can be. And when I say the best person I can be, I mean, I want my life to be remembered as perfect. Everything about it was perfect. Nothing went wrong. And that transition to my legacy is part of that.
That's a good point. Wills aren't mean tested.
No.
You don't need a certain level of assets to write a will. Everyone should have one. If you've got loved ones, if you've got even simple affairs, it's worth having a simple will in place to make sure that if anything did happen, your affairs are in order and protected.
Barry, great to meet you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Adam, fantastic.
Thank you, James.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Life's Booming and it's inspired you to go and update your will. If it hasn't, well, just go and do it. What's wrong with you? Get it done. We'll have more Life's Booming coming your way soon. I'll look forward to seeing you again there. For more Life's Booming, visit seniors.com.au/podcast. Brought to you by Australian Seniors.